how you doing? Chances are probably not okay. That's okay. No one's okay. We still don't know what's happening. We've still got all the rubbish stuff to deal with and none of the good stuff, and no clear answers on when the good stuff will be back. It's all right if you feel a bit meh, a bit pants, or even, really quite crap some of the time. This week, we're going to be talking about children and their mental health, because the pandemic has had a huge impact on our children as well. So it's really important that we know what to look for in our children's mental health and how to have a conversation with them about it. It's Children's Mental Health Week, so I thought this would be an interesting one to do, rather than most of the stuff I've seen out there which says take them off the technology. Hello, we're in COVID times. That's the only fun they've got, and it's the only break we've got. We're not taking all the technology off them right now, let's be honest. So instead, let's be a bit more realistic and think about what we can do. The first thing I want you to do as parents is to remove the fear around the word mental health. Chances are, when we grew up, mental health was the crazy lady in the town down the road. Nobody really talked about mental health as an actual thing. And when we did talk about mental health, it was usually hushed and shushed and a sad thing. We kind of grew up with this idea that mental health means depression. It means someone who's in bed for a long time, someone who's unpredictable, someone who is poorly and unwell all of the time. There's a degree of truth in that. Mental health can mean depression, but in the same way that physical health can mean a cold. It's not defined as that one thing exclusively. Mental health is a spectrum. Over here, you can have super fit, super amazing, super well mental health. And over here, you can have really bad, really poor, really sad mental health. And the two things can exist in the same person in the same lifetime. The official statistics for mental health are that 1 in 3 of us will experience a mental health problem. This is not true. Most of us who work in mental health will tell you that we have all experienced mental health problems. It's just that on the sliding scale of what that actually looks like, ours were maybe a bit lower than someone who had a massive mental health problem. So it could be that you had the mental health equivalent of a cold. Those of us who get colds most of the time can go to work. We feel a bit rubbish, a bit snuffly. Unless you are a male, then obviously you need to lie on the sofa and have your wife bring you things for 3 days while you cry about how hard it is for you. I digress. Most of us with a cold can carry on with our lives. You don't feel great. You can get the mental health equivalent of a cold. I'm sure all of you have had a couple of days where you're like, I don't really know why, I just feel a bit rubbish. I don't feel like myself. I don't really feel particularly motivated. I don't want to do anything. Yeah. And you come through it a couple of days later and you kind of go, I don't even know what that was about. Must have been tired. Mental health equivalent of a cold. You could have the mental health equivalent of food poisoning. And this is really interesting because one of the things we think about mental health, and poor mental health especially, is that it urgently needs treatment, it must be seen by a doctor, and it's going to go on forever. And that's not the case. It's really not the case. You could get the mental health equivalent of food poisoning when you've been under a period of toxic stress. It's basically what I explained in my last video I experienced a couple of weeks ago. I had a period of really toxic stress, so I ate something that was really bad for me, and it built up in my system, and I tried to hide it and I tried to not let it show, just like you might try not to be sick because it feels awful, and eventually it builds up in your system so much and you just go ugh, and you throw up, and it's really, really horrible, and you might throw up again and again and again in a short period of time, but eventually it stops and you feel better because you've got all of that toxic stuff out of your system. You can have the mental health equivalent of that. A lot of us are having the mental health equivalent of that with sudden meltdowns, with periods of stress where you just go, oh, I can't do this anymore. And you might sit there and be like, I've said awful things, I've lost my temper, I slammed the door, I disappeared, I was a nightmare, I got drunk. But afterwards, when it's done, it's done. And you might sit there a couple of days later and go, what happened there? I don't know what happened there. That was a bit weird. You don't need to go to a doctor because that's happened to you once, especially during COVID, or even a couple of times. But if that's happened to you every weekend, you might have a food allergy. You might have something in your house that is making you sick. You might be being poisoned by your other half. Who knows? The same thing in your mental health is the case. You might have a job that's making you poorly. You might have some unresolved issues in yourself that are building up your toxic stress. So if it's going on, then you need to see a professional. But just like 3 weeks after having food poisoning, you wouldn't be like, I am a terrible person. There's something wrong with me for that food poisoning I had 3 weeks ago. You don't need to do that to yourself over an outburst because you were extremely stressed and your brain had become overwhelmed with toxic influences. You might get really poorly, and some of us do sometimes get really poorly, and you might then need to see a doctor and a professional. You might need to take medication. You might need to get additional support. You might need therapies. Much like recovering from an injury requires rehabilitation, you might need talking therapies. You might need a hospital stay if it's really severe. That's further along the mental health spectrum. But the chances are that even then there will be periods where you feel better, because that's what mental health does. It does that throughout our lives. And sometimes we get a little bit poorly and sometimes we get very poorly. But what doesn't make it better is not talking about it and pretending it doesn't exist. By opening up the discussion and talking about it the way I just have, which is very recognisable, you can build the conversation of, have you ever felt like that? And then you can build a conversation, much like we have with our children, about eating the right foods and getting enough sleep to protect their physical health. What do you need to do to protect your mental health? Getting enough sleep and eating the right foods are a pretty good start. What else helps your mental health? Time with others, time outside, time in the sunshine. You can start to have that conversation with them. The next thing, if you want to have an honest conversation with your children and build mental health and good mental health into your family dynamic, is to be really honest about your own mental health. Now, imagine the scene. You've slipped over in the bathroom. You've broken your arm. There's blood pouring everywhere. It's obviously completely messed up. There's a bone hanging out. It's a lovely image, isn't it? Really beautiful. I'm good with the imagery. You've just screeched. Your kids have come in. They've gone, "Mum, what's the matter?" And you go, "Oh, this is going to be unpleasant for them." "Nothing, I'm absolutely fine. Fine, completely fine." Now, you ain't actually, if you're like some of the mums I know, be able to get away with that for a bit. They'll know something's not right, but you're saying it's fine and you're refusing to deal with it. So they'll be like, okay. But they'll notice it when you cook one-handed, when you can't pick them up anymore. They'll notice it if you get an infected arm, which you will if you leave it. We would never break our arms and be like, "I am so ashamed of that broken arm. It's going to scare the kids." You'd be like, "Damn it, I've got cooking and stuff to do. I need to get this fixed." You go and get it fixed. Now let's rewind that a little bit. You're in the bathroom because it's really hard. You've been home educating for weeks. You've had a row with your other half. Your boss is expecting too much. The school have just put some more deadlines in place for your kids. You're tired, you're stressed, and you really don't want to do it anymore. And you burst into tears. And your kids hear you and they come in and they go, "Mum, are you all right?" And you go, and instead of blood spurting out, it's water from your eyes. You go, "No, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine." There's two things that happen from that to our children when we do that. One is that they get the message internalized that feelings are wrong, that we should not talk about our feelings because obviously they're very bad. And two, you're hiding something, so they can't feel quite safe. And at the moment, that's toxic. What would it be like for you to say to your child, "I'm just finding this really, really hard. I love you. It's not your fault, but I just need a moment." Trust me, even a very young child will get that. We talk about how we don't want to show our kids their feelings because it'll scare them, but actually it scares them more when they know our feelings exist and we deny them, and they learn to do the same. And exactly like a broken arm, that if not treated will get infected, gangrenous, will heal in the wrong way, will cause pain forever, so will feelings and emotions that are squished down and pretended not to exist. That's where poor mental health can start. Not always, but it starts with feelings and emotional literacy and pretending that neither of those things matter. You might be really uncomfortable having a conversation with your kid about feelings. You might not even know where to start. If you've got very young kids, you can usually just start with happy and sad. There are little octopuses that you can turn up and down for whether they're happy or in a bad mood. It's super cute. Look them up. There are lots and lots of ways to open this conversation, but there are a few simple things that you can do that I will share with you now that make it much easier. Firstly, don't treat it like Voldemort. They're feelings. They don't have to be hidden behind Harry Potter. You're all good. You don't need expecto patronum to deal with them. You don't need to get a wand out and sit on the sofa. They aren't bad. They aren't evil. They aren't dark. Emotional and mental health is exactly the same as physical health. In exactly the same way, it's off the cuff. You might say to your kids, "You know what, love? I think you should probably put that biscuit back. You've had 5 today and that's enough. You're going to not be able to sleep because of all the sugar." You can perfectly happily say to your kids, do you know what, darling? You've been on that computer for about 3 hours, and actually I know that that can leave you a bit buzzy and unable to sleep, and then you're going to struggle with your mood tomorrow, and it's not great for your mental health, so how don't we put it down? So you just weave it into the conversation like it is. If you have dinner with your family, that's a great time to talk about things. Put the phones away, turn the TV off, and have dinner as a family. Statistically, we know that the families that have the best preserved mental health over the lifetime, even if there are short-term issues, are families who eat together, because problems become apparent. Now, if you have a child that you think may have an eating disorder, that can be difficult. That's a separate issue. But in the main, in healthy families, that's fine. Try and give your child enough quality time. We know that a child who has 40 minutes with either one or the other parent, or both, every day is about 80% less likely to struggle with issues of self-esteem and the sort of underlying stuff that can lead to poorer mental health conditions. That sounds really, really hard, but actually 40 minutes isn't that hard when you realise that quality time does not have to mean let's sit in front of each other like this and have a really awkward conversation. In fact, that's probably the worst thing you can do. You can play a board game. My husband and son are watching WandaVision at the moment, and then they spent an awful lot of time looking for Easter eggs because they both love, I don't even know what Easter eggs and Marvel films have got to do with each other, but that's what they've been doing. And that's been really bonding. My other son and my husband have got football stuff going on, and they talk about that all the time, and that's bonding. It's actual time with commonality involved, so try and find commonality. I don't have that much commonality with my kids, but my husband pulls a blinder by telling my son, my 15-year-old son, that Mummy could get dumped in a bush if she keeps walking the dog late at night. And he went, oh, I'm a man now, obviously at 15 and almost 6 foot tall. So he now comes with me for walks with the dog. And it's been really lovely to get to know him on that level. We're not looking at each other. So if you want to have a conversation with a teenager, try and do it with someone somewhere where there's no direct eye contact. And at first it was fairly light conversation. And now he's sharing his thoughts about everything with me. And it's really interesting. If you want your child to talk to you about any kind of mental health thing, you've got to listen to the crap they spout on the regular. So if you are shutting them down all the time going, yeah, I'm busy, don't expect them to talk to you about the stuff that matters to you and you want to know about it. It's really important to try and make time to actively listen. And actively listen means asking questions. Don't ask your child if they're okay. No one's okay right now, so it's a silly question. I did it the other day, sat in my head and went, of course he's not okay, no one's okay. Try and ask open questions. You know, I noticed earlier on that you got pretty angry when you were on the computer, and I just wondered what was going on there for you. They might still not engage with you, but you are showing that you're paying attention. If you are worried about mental health, the signs to look out for: significant withdrawal, a sudden significant change in behaviour, risk-taking behaviours, extreme mood swings, issues around food and control. Those are all things that if they're going on in your home right now, there's no shame in it. Keep a diary. Write a list, because doctors are very busy and it's very difficult to get them to pay attention to this stuff. Write a list of exactly what's going on and in what situations and any triggers that you know of, and take that to your doctor and ask for what you want to support your child. It's the best thing you can do to help a child that you think is struggling, is be really honest, really open and say, we need this. How do we access that? That's a very top line look at mental health in our children. But the first step that I want you to take from this video is that there is no shame in addressing mental health. The old view of mental health as the crazy aunt who sits in the corner and was knocked out by Prozac. It just doesn't exist anymore. This conversation should be as easy for us as it is to talk about physical health. I wouldn't be surprised if in another 5 years there'll be a mental health version of Joe Wicks turning up to be the school's mental health person every Monday and Friday. I might even do it myself if I thought I could get a new sauna like his in the garden. Probably don't look as good in like a thread. Sorry. Take time to talk about it this week. Actually look at your kids. See, are they okay? Are they, you know, as much as they can be in terms of being okay with not being okay? Are they really struggling? You know, have a point in your head that you're like, okay, well, this is my middle point. This is them in a great place. This is them in not a great place. This is the point we change it. But most of all, don't be afraid of these conversations. Get really, really comfortable with talking about feelings and emotions and being honest. And don't leave anyone in your family with a broken arm that doesn't heal properly. See you soon, guys.